Welcome to our fifth lecture in Intro to Mobile. In this lecture, we're going to start by going over our quiz from week 1. That will be lectures 1 and 2. We're also going to take a deeper look at designing your first mobile app, considerations when designing your app, for instance. And then we're going to take a look at some user interface design. So to start with, the quiz from it was week number 1. The week 2 quiz, which is recordings 3 and 4. That quiz is in progress right now, so I won't go over those answers until that quiz is actually turned in and graded. First, what are the top 2 mobile platforms today ranked by sales? Apple, iOS, Google, Android. Ad revenue. An advertisement on a mobile phone typically pays the publisher more than an advertisement on a web page. That's false. Generally speaking, and of course there are exceptions, but generally speaking, advertisements on web pages tend to pay more. The mobile model, they just haven't quite figured out yet. Okay? Analog cellular phone service is generally considered first generation or 1G. 0G kind of predates that. 1G was the first time we really had cellular service. 2G was the first time we had digital service. With a digital signal, you can pack more information into the same size pipe, which is very important. Okay, cellular service and 1G is more susceptible to eavesdropping because basically your voice was going right over the airwaves, just like using a CB radio or something like that. It could easily be intercepted by somebody who was able to scan for that frequency. And police scanners back in the 90s, the 80s and 90s, were able to scan over cellular frequencies. And eventually, scanning for cellular eventually became illegal. For cordless phones, though, it was actually still very doable up until about the late 90s. Okay, SMS text messaging was first introduced in 2G. Okay, hard to believe we had cell phones without text at some point. 4G is generally considered 10 times faster than 3G. It treats everything as data. Even your calls are treated as basically streaming audio. Okay. 3 advantages of mobile devices that we discussed in class, and that is key. What did we discuss in class? Well, it's always with the user, so many times it has a convenience factor over getting up and going to a desktop or a laptop computer. There's a bit of convenience there. Oftentimes, you know the user's location, and we'll talk a little bit about that today as well. The user's location and how we can use GPS to figure out where the user is instead of prompting the user and saying, hey, where are you? What's your preferred location? We're seeing a lot of that now. Even as recently as 5 years ago, many times websites would say, where are you located? Now, many times they'll take a first guess based on your latitude and longitude or your IP address, and then assume that you're at that location, but allow you to change it if you wish as well. So that's kind of a nice convenience that we're getting. 3 disadvantages. We have limited screen size, many times limited peripherals, limited battery life, online offline toggle, things like that are disadvantages. So those are the answers from our first quiz. Okay. Moving on from that then, let's consider some things about designing your mobile app. And I believe we went over a little bit of this last week, so we'll just do a bit of a review. Should it be an app? Should it be a web page? I've often said that the ratio of ideas to phones is about 1 to 1. So pretty much anybody who has a smartphone has at least one idea for an app. And even as recently as yesterday, somebody came to me with an idea for an app, and he said must support both Android and iPhone. And when I talked, I said, well, what do you want the user to do? And the response was, well, I want the user to go on a website and enter information. And I said, okay, then why do you need a mobile app? And the response was, well, you're right, maybe I don't. So mobile apps tend to be buzzwords, but let's make sure it really should be an app, because honestly, there's a lot more work in having a mobile app over having a web page. You have to think about the different platforms. You have to think about how you're going to distribute it, so on and so forth. Now, assuming we have decided it should be an app, then we need to decide what platform. Okay, so are we going to go Android, iPhone, BlackBerry, Nokia, Windows Phone? Are we going to go tablet? Are we going to go phone, watch, TV? Okay, how are we going to distribute it? Are we going to distribute it through the normal app channels? And how are we going to do maintenance fixes? How are we going to make sure that users take updates? Okay, so okay, we saw a lot of this on our quiz question from previous quiz question. Advantages, GPS awareness, accelerometer, camera. It's always with the user, so on and so forth. Okay, considerations. Again, I think this is a bit of a review. One thing I did add to this, and this is a bit tricky, is you kind of have three things that are competing with each other, especially if you have a deadline. Not only does everybody have an idea for a mobile phone app, but they all want it done right away. And there are three things that are kind of fighting for each other here. Number one, how many features do we want to put on it? Number two, what quality will it have? The more features I have, the more chance there is for something to go wrong. That was my dad's theory on Volkswagen Beetles. He said they didn't tend to have many features, so they didn't have much that broke. When I buy cars, I tend to buy things with not a lot of features. I tend to buy stick shift, manual windows if I can, things like that, because features tend to break. Features tend to break. They require more testing. Less features is less prone to break. Think of it times you've been in an old car and the power windows don't work anymore. That's more common than manual windows not working. Okay? So the more you have, the more there is to break. And finally, timeline. Uh, Usually these apps want to be, the person who's running these apps wants the apps to be available quickly. But quickly means you have less time to put in features. And quickly means you have less time to focus on quality. So we need to kind of balance these out. If we have more time, we can put in more features. If we have more time for quality, we can add more features. If we have less features, we need less testing time, we can get it out faster. So these are three things that we really have to balance carefully. Okay. Now, Apple put together some app design strategies, and I have paraphrased those in the coming slides. And on the original PowerPoint, actually, let me see if I can, because this will be published on the web, let me bring up the citation here. 1 second. Okay. I will add the citation to this. I don't have it in this slide deck, but actually 1 second. I'll get it right here. One moment, please. Okay. This is the site where I paraphrased these next few slides. It's on the Apple developer website, and it talks about app design strategies. I like what they did here because I went through a lot of it myself in Plant Places, and these are things we have to consider carefully. Okay, first of all, user comes to you with an app, an idea, and what's the first thing you do? You ask them, are you sure this is an app? Are you sure this isn't better as a website? Or could it be a website that's just styled for a phone? So is it a website that's easy to use on a mobile device? Okay, go over the advantages and disadvantages of being on a phone, location awareness, accelerometer versus limited processing, so on and so forth. And seriously, use this to filter out ideas. I've had a lot of people come to me with ideas that require a lot of processing power or a lot of centralized data, and they're just not appropriate for a mobile phone. So use that as a first step to narrow things down. Some people just kind of want to have an app, and then later they think about what they're going to do with it. But think about what you want to do first, then decide if it's appropriate for an app. Okay. Once you've done that, then brainstorm a bit and think of all the features you'd like to have. Go ahead and do this first. Do this before you start writing the app. Because honestly, if you don't, you'll find as you write the app, you'll think of more features, and then when you cobble them together, it won't look natural. But if you think of all the possible features first, then you can kind of prioritize them. You can decide these are things I really want to demonstrate. These are things I do not want to demonstrate. Okay, number 2, and this one is honestly harder than it sounds. Determine who your users are. How are you providing value to them? How can you aggregate data and turn it into information? This is tough. On Plant Places Mobile, the very first user was me. We had a plant identification program where we would list all of the plants at a certain mailing address. And then you could click on that mailing address and it would show you all the plants there. That works great in a neighborhood where you have quarter-acre yards. But we found when we started listing plants at Spring Grove Cemetery, which was about 700 acres, and the Cincinnati Zoo, which is 78 acres, just knowing the mailing address of a plant was no longer any good. So we wanted to start adding GPS. So I went to Australia on vacation. I bought a GPS device, and the idea is you synchronize the clock on the GPS device with the clock on your camera. And then you go back later and try to marry the two together. That was a waste of money, honestly, because my camera clock wasn't set properly, the GPS clock was not either, and on top of all of that, I was in Australia with my computer on Australian time, and so it was very difficult to figure out which pictures went to which GPS. So I decided it would be easier if I could use the GPS on the phone, which is free, always free, and use that to actually record plant locations. So that was easy. So I was the first user. But on the other hand, I also really wanted to do the search by color that I'd been working on for a while, and I had not figured a way to allow the user to take a picture and then search by colors on that picture, which is what I always wanted to do. Traditionally, I'd thought about using a website for that and having the user upload a picture, and then after that picture's uploaded, dissect the picture, find the top 12 colors, so on and so forth. But that requires several steps. We want to make it easy and natural. So I thought, oh, well, what the heck? Mobile app is perfect for this because we can easily grab the colors and so on and so forth. Then there was another audience, which was the nursery trade, the retail trade, and giving them the ability to add plants that they have for sale. So really there are 3 different users there, and that became hard to define which user do we want to focus on? Do we want to make 3 different apps? One for administrators like me, who's going to be adding GPS locations and administering locations. Do we want to make a different app for retailers? Do we want to make a different app for consumers? There are a lot of, advantages and disadvantages to that. So, biggest advantage of one single app is the number. When one thing just for fun that I check every day is my Google Play Developer Console, and it lists how many downloads I have. The bigger this number is, the more people tend to trust the app and they're willing to download the app. So I want to grow this number as quickly as I can and get it as high as I can to get more downloads out of it. So if I have one single app with 3 different audiences, then I have 3 different audiences that are increasing this number. On the other hand, if I have 3 different apps, I have 3 different apps I have to manage. And what about things that they share? And that gets kind of tricky. Probably the happiest medium here is to have one app, know who the user is, maybe what they've done on your app before, and then tailor the app for that user. So I have one app. When the user opens that application, the application should maybe have some idea who that user is based on what they've done previously in the app. And then prioritize content to that user, okay, to that classification. Okay, finally, step number 3. Filter the feature list through the audience definition. So when you've decided who your audience is, compare that to the feature list and decide which features are important. We want apps that do a lot, but again, if we go back to the considerations, we remember that we have 3 things competing with us, together. Features, quality, timeline. All of these are important. So you might have a long list of features that you want, but if you can prioritize a few features, you can get something to market quickly. Okay? So, features versus timeline. Quality. You don't want to neglect that because remember that developer console I showed you. One big component on how likely someone is to download your app is how many other people have installed it and also what is the rating. You don't want to release an app early that is substandard quality because your rating will suffer and it will take a long time, if ever, to recover from that. So, quality needs to be considered very, very carefully. Okay, so now, does that mean that we have to go with less than the number of features than we want? Does that mean we really want to do 6 things and we only do 3 of them and that's it? No, not at all. It just means we iterate. We focus on 3 features, or whatever the features are. We make them very high quality. We release in a timely manner. Step number 4, iterate. Okay, start from step 1. Look at your next highest priority features. Okay, what do you want to do next? Work on those, filter those through your audience, guarantee their quality, verify their quality, release, iterate again. So here's some things. Here's some things we did on Plant Places Mobile, and I have to tell you, this was really tricky. Again, don't underestimate the value of doing this early. A lot of times you want to jump in and get to writing an app, but it does really pay to step back and decide what you're doing first. So here are things that we considered on Plant Places Mobile. Search by camera, so take a picture and search by the colors. What did that mean? How complex was that? Fairly complex. We have to invoke the camera, allow the user to use this camera, which is a separate program on the Android device. Okay. Then once the user has accepted a photo and returned it to us, then we have to get that information from the picture. Okay, we have to decide what the top 12 colors are and then give that to the user and then say which of these do you want to use. Okay, search by album means allow the user to search from an existing picture on the user's phone. How complex is that? Well, we don't have to invoke the camera, but we do need to be able to communicate with the file system, and more importantly, allow the user to traverse the file system. Go into directories, go out of directories. Go up a level, go down a level. We need to know what's a directory, what's a picture. We need to know what file types we want to read. So a bit of complexity there. Now, next thing, advanced search. So search by color, but you could also search by things like native. Is it a native plant? Okay. When does it bloom? Let's see, I'll go back here while I'm talking. I'm going to go back to the advanced search screen. Okay, 1 second. So, okay, so that's another thing. Can we allow for a more advanced search over the simple search by color? Okay. GPS plants. This was a big one, and this was kind of a natural one to do. Not too hard to do. It just had to be done. So, okay, how do we grab the GPS location? What's a reasonable time to update the GPS location? When I first set up the GPS ability, a couple things. I first did it on a cruise ship, and it took a long time to try to get GPS satellites because literally I was in the middle of the ocean and moving quickly. Okay. Secondly, what I did is I gave it some very basic parameters, and I found out that if you don't set a time interval for it to wait, and you don't set a minimum distance, it will update the GPS coordinates very, very quickly, very frequently, which will tend to draw down the battery life. Okay. View plant collections. So view plants that you have GPSed previously. Okay. View a map of plants. This was a late addition. Here's one that you often won't notice as an end user, but is very important. The ability to toggle online, offline. Think about your mobile phone. Think about walking with your mobile phone and when you lose reception. Think about walking from Zimmer to Revachol to Crosley, take an elevator in Crosley. Imagine trying to be on the phone on your phone that entire time. What happens? What tends to happen is your call gets dropped. Okay, so that's something that's important, but the user won't always see it directly. It's more about user experience. Okay. Next, when when you GPS plants, we want the ability to upload plants, upload GPS locations, but you need an account for that. So, what about creating an account? Do you have to do that on plantplaces.com, the website, or do you do that straight from the mobile app? Okay. Finally, when you upload a photo, can you upload the photo? Can you upload the photo to Plant Places as well? So this was the list, and it was a pretty big list. If I had it to do over again, I probably would have trimmed this list down a little bit. But nonetheless, which did we decide to do? Okay, so step two. Um, I'm sorry. Sorry. We have to define our users. Step two, we need to decide who our users are, and then we need to filter the list through those users. So we have administrators. Administrators like me and the Cincinnati Zoo and other people who would sign up for it, they can GPS plants, they can add plants remotely. It's interesting in the field of horticulture, people tend to be outside a lot. They tend to be doing things like maintaining landscapes, cutting grass. So they're not, honestly, not very computer literate because most of their working day is outside. So when Plant Places, the website, came about, there kind of was a bit of a learning curve. Now with Plant Places Mobile, the whole idea is that you don't have to go back inside to input data. You can do it right from your phone, right where you are. Okay, so that was a lot of the reason for Plant Places Mobile was to break the habit of I write it down in a notepad, then I go into an office and I type it in, because usually the first step would happen, but then people would get busy and the second step would not. People would not tend to put things into a computer later. They just keep them written in a notepad. Okay, next audience, retailers. Search by color and inventory tracking, two things offered to the retailers. And then users, search by color, GPS plants, and view a map of plants around you, kind of like a self-guided tour, something like that. Okay. Now let's merge these two lists together and decide what is necessary for phase one. And here's what we came up with. Everything from the first step except for create account and upload photos. Okay. Everything else we decided to go ahead and release in phase one. Now, that's a lot of features and it took a lot of testing time. To be honest, it was mostly ready to go around October, November of 2012. But because of the high amount of features, it took a good 4 months of heavy testing and a lot of bugs found in that time. I found a lot of bugs. I had two other people testing with me. I found a lot of things I never thought of that needed to be fixed. And then finally, on February 3rd, release it. Okay, release it, gather some feedback, and what was step four? Well, remember, step four is iterate. Start again. So step four, okay, let's consider some more things that we want to do. Okay, so create account. It became cumbersome to tell people they had to go to plantplaces.com, the website, and create an account. Easier for them to do it all in one step. So now, if it recognizes that you don't have an account, it gives you that ability to create account. Okay. Also, something that was important for something that was important for retailers. Pardon me, I'm going down to number three. Enter plants for sale. What you could do, let's see, I'll show you here. This is the advanced search screen. So you can still search by color, but you can also search by name. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the menu and 1 second, and I'm going to choose enter bloom dates and plans for sale. It's a bit slow, so because the emulator by nature is a bit slow, so we'll give it a second to respond. But what you can do is, if you are a retailer or if you're a consumer and you see a plant for sale, you can indicate that that plant is for sale. For example, if I go to plantplaces.com, the website, okay, I'm going to go down and I'm going to search for Rudbeckia, which many people know as a black-eyed Susan. Okay, Rudbeckia, that'll work. Click, search. Okay, here we go. take a look towards the top, what you'll see is there are 10 of these for sale, $5.98 at Lowe's in Springdale, location of that Lowe's where this was snapped. And then the date this was identified, July 6th, which, by the way, was yesterday. And how do I know that? Because I did it. So I was at Lowe's and my wife had to run in and get some electrical wiring. They had a whole bunch of annuals out in the front, and I said, oh, hang on, can you run inside, get your stuff? I'm going to stay out here and I'm going to notify some plants. So I took the mobile app, and what I did is I grabbed all the inventory from that Lowe's that I could and their price points, and then posted them on Plant Places using the Android app. So that's the new feature, which is enter plants for sale. Another thing is enter bloom dates. So the neat thing about this, let me see if I got my okay. Might take a moment for the emulator to come back. When you enter bloom dates, you can also search by bloom dates, which is pretty handy. So you can enter bloom dates, and then later you can search by bloom dates. Now, if you're from out of town, or maybe you live somewhere else for an extended period, one thing you might notice is that things bloom different times in different areas. For instance, if you're here in the spring, and then you go to Chicago, you'll find that blooms in Chicago are generally about 3 weeks behind blooms in Cincinnati. So what's blooming in Chicago now was blooming in Cincinnati 3 weeks ago. So bloom dates, what's interesting about bloom dates is that varies by location. Now guess what? We can associate bloom data with latitude and longitude because the phone has GPS, and while users are entering bloom dates, we can track where those bloom dates were recorded. Okay. Still off the list, upload photos, and a new entry, which is make maps better. Upload photos is still off the list for two reasons. Number one, a lot of data. Number two, are we really comfortable that phones can get the quality of pictures that we really want to have? And the answer is starting to become yes. Okay. So that was version number 5. Now here's 3. Here's Sprint 3, which I'm currently working on now. Number 1, consolidate and simplify. Make the user interface more intuitive. Number 2, finally upload photos. Number 3, do some drastic improvements to the maps functionality. The maps in the more recent version of Android is much better than the previous version. Okay, and then start making it multi-platform. So this is a view of the different iterations. We start with the big wish list in step 1, in iteration 1. Consider the users. Pick the options that are the most targeted towards those users. Okay, and then release to the users. Okay, then go to the next iteration, and then repeat, go to the next iteration, and so on and so forth. Okay. So finally, one thing we want to consider is how to design the app for the device. We want to think hard about what kind of user interface we're going to have. We want to have a fair amount of information. And shoot, let's see, I'm trying to get back. Sorry, my emulator is not responding. I have it on the other screen. We want to get, okay, so here I have the search screen, and one person told me, why can't I search by this and this and this? Well, we have to consider our minimized real estate. If we look at the full live Plant Places advanced search, it has a lot of fields on it. Genus, species, cultivar, common name, category, minimum size, availability, full sun, part shade, lots of checkboxes, the color drop down. That's a lot. That's a lot. That's more than we could fit on a mobile screen. Looks great on a web screen, not so great on a mobile screen. Take a look at what we can do with mobile though. To try to fit more on a screen, what we can do is put the most important things highlighted first. Name of the plant, color, and the bloom date. The idea is that you could search for white flowers that bloom in May, for instance. But now I can click on bloom date, and it will collapse. I can click on features and it will expand. And now I see I can search on things that are native and edible. Okay. I can expand on sort by, or I can collapse sort by. Okay. So this is something that's more designed for a mobile phone than a web screen, because we don't have as much search information as we do on a full website. We do have a lot, but we fit it on one screen by kind of doing an accordion. Finally, at this point, I have native and edible selected. I can hit search, and what we'll get back are a list of plants in Cincinnati that are native to this area and also have edible parts. And again, there's a bit of a lag here. The emulator tends to run a bit slowly, but that's what we get back. So something that's more designed for a mobile experience. Okay, and here we go, a list of native and edible plants. There we go. Where we could do the same search on the web. I could also search on native and edible, and we'd see a bit of a different response. We would see something that has more information, more pictures, meant for a more robust network capability and a larger monitor. Okay, so consider the device. Embrace tappable UI like the expand, the accordion that we saw there. Now we have to carefully consider the device as well. Is this something that would be used on a tablet? We have the phone and the tablet. Now we know other things are coming, like watches, TVs, things like that. Would it make sense to run on these other devices as well? Okay. How would the images look? I showed last week that we actually need to make several different sizes of our images, of our icons. One's for small devices, medium, large, and extra large devices. So we actually have to make different sizes. So those are our design considerations. And remember, as Apple defines, what we want to do is list the features, determine users, filter the feature list through the users, and then iterate. So we'll go ahead and stop this recording there. Next, we're going to pick up with user interface design, which is one of my favorite subjects. So we'll start that on the next lecture. Thank you.